Immigration and homelessness, how the combined humanitarian needs are confronting Catholic charities in one U.S. city. Political primaries. Voters in 7 states are set to decide more matchups for November's elections. Deadly attack. New developments in the aftermath of the bloodshed during a Catholic mass in Nigeria. And what is a woman? A cultural commentator tells us why he made a documentary on gender and what the response has been so far. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The Biden administration struggles with a record-setting problem. Migration across the U.S. border with Mexico has surged to its highest level in decades. The issue is a key topic at this week's Summit of the Americas. White House correspondent Owen Jensen is in Los Angeles and reports for us now. Owen.
Tracy, great to see you. President Joe Biden is coming here tomorrow and will join Vice President Kamala Harris at the Summit of the Americas. Now, as this international event gets underway, a caravan of some 15,000 migrants is currently headed towards the U.S. from southern Mexico.
For the leaders gathered at the Summit of the Americas, all they have to do is turn on the TV to see the latest caravan of migrants heading for the border. More than 5,000 families, including pregnant women and thousands of children, mostly Venezuelans, Central Americans, and Africans.
How are we welcoming people in an orderly fashion?
Monsignor Gregory Cox is the executive director of Catholic Charities in Los Angeles. He sees the struggle of migrants every day, coming from desperate circumstances, he says, and seeking a better life. His big concern is the young migrants living in the shadows.
They're not, in a sense, legalized yet, and you never know if you're going to be deported back home. And that's, unless you're ever in that situation, I think we in the United States have a hard time understanding the agony that young people go through in adulthood because they haven't been naturalized here in the country.
Monsignor Cox, whose office is not too far away from the Summit of the Americas here in downtown L.A., is urging lawmakers to act. He emphasizes in a bipartisan manner to address the issue of immigration.
But the only group that can deal with this is the legislative body of the United States. And they need to be civil. There need to be, in a sense, politicians who are statesmen or stateswomen who can understand the system and bring the differences and the similarities together.
Vice President Kamala Harris, in charge of addressing the root causes of migration, is also here for the Summit of the Americas. She announced more than $1.9 billion in new private sector commitments as part of Call to Action for Northern Central America. Also, the White House revealed a list of over 24 countries attending the summit and another 24 observers, including Archbishop Christophe Pierre, Apostolic Nuncio to the United States.
Now, on the growing list of countries not sending their top leaders to the summit, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Mexico's president will visit President Biden at the White House later this summer. In Los Angeles, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are still attempting to reach a compromise on a series of gun reform bills. House Democrats want to pass a pair of measures that have little chance of getting through the Senate. Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of senators continues to work on a narrower package, one they hope can attract 60 votes. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more. Eric.
Well, Tracy, the House bills range from banning high-capacity magazines to even strengthening red flag laws. Now, tomorrow, the House Oversight Committee will be holding a hearing where they're going to be having survivors of the recent shootings actually testifying. However, I spoke to the lead Republican who sits on that committee, and he says, although negotiations are taking place in the Senate, over on the House side, Democrats want nothing to do with Republicans.
In the House, Pelosi wants to pass the most extreme gun control bill imaginable to just fire up her base. And at the end of the day, they're doing more harm than good to their cause.
It's a different story in the Senate. Democrat Chris Murphy says both sides realize something must pass.
It's frankly a test of democracy. It's a test of the federal government as to whether we can deliver at a moment of just fierce anxiety amongst the American public. So we're closer than ever before. Let's see if we land it.
The top Republican in those bipartisan talks, Senator John Cornyn, cautions there are limits to what Republicans are willing to accept.
We are not talking about restricting the rights of current law-abiding gun owners or citizens. This is a constitutional right.
West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin supports raising the age to buy a weapon and stronger background checks, which he says would have prevented the Texas shooting. As for a ban on assault weapons?
Talking about bans, I wouldn't have a problem on looking at some of these things. What is the necessity? Tell me what the purpose is, and let's use them for those purposes.
Senator Cornyn says he wants the FBI to consider a gun purchaser's juvenile record when they attempt to buy a weapon. He says Republicans support, quote, common sense solutions.
Strengthening mental health, bolstering school security, keeping guns out of the hands of people who are already legally prohibited from having them. I think a lot of our colleagues could get behind those provisions.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Leader Mitch McConnell do welcome the bipartisan talks. Now, I did speak with senators who tell me that another full member meeting will take place either on Wednesday night or Thursday night of this week. Some senators hope to have something voted on by July 4th, but right now, that seems doubtful. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
In the run-up to November's midterm elections, 7 U.S. states are holding primaries today. Congressional races are on the ballot in California, Iowa, Mississippi, Montana, New Mexico, New Jersey, and South Dakota. Meanwhile, in Texas, pro-life Democrat Congressman Henry Cuellar maintains a 197-vote margin against challenger Jessica Cisneros, who says she plans to request a recount. South Korea and the U.S. are continuing joint military exercises to demonstrate readiness toward North Korea. South Korea's military launched 16 warplanes combined with 4 American jets. Together with Japan, the 3 nations are preparing possible responses if North Korea conducts a nuclear test in violation of existing UN Security Council resolutions. In Nigeria, victims from Sunday's deadly church attack receive hospital treatment as survivors describing what took place. Worshippers say gunmen were both inside and outside the church during Mass in an apparent coordinated attack, which included explosives. Dozens of people were killed and many others injured, including children. Those responsible have not yet been identified. And joining us now to discuss is Edward Clancy, Director of Outreach for Aid to the Church in Need in the United States. Ed, welcome. Good to see you. I understand the Diocese of Ondo has only confirmed about 38 people dead, but news outlets have reported up to 50 people have died. Do you have any updates, and do you know how those injured are doing?
No updates on the numbers. The diocese did ask that those who had privately taken the bodies of loved ones who had passed to report it so that there was a correct calculation, but also so that the proper burials and funeral masses might be said, because they're concerned that there are going to be a lot of people without the full funeral rite.
I know the diocese released a statement about the horrific attack, saying in part, quote, "As a church, we are so grieved by this gruesome murder, and we condemn the evil meted on our brothers and sisters who have only come to worship God. It's quite disheartening and embarrassing that these unnecessary killings, kidnappings, and other atrocities are now done with impunity on a daily basis." Ed, your thoughts on the diocese statement, and also can you talk about what the diocese is doing for those who were attacked?
Well, they are probably holding back a lot of anger and trying to remain even keeled during this. And the diocese in Nigeria, unfortunately, has become very good at dealing with trauma in situations like this. It's the first time that it's happened in a place like Ondo and Owa. That usually it's been happening up in north in Kaduna and further north, where we've heard many cases of this happening. So the diocese right now is taking care of the families, visiting the sick and the orphaned and the widowed, and doing all of the first tier things that need to be done. But as Archbishop Kagama once said, they won't forget. They will continue to take care of these families for many years to come. So I think that's what's happening now and what will happen.
Yeah, and what impact do you think this will have on the faithful in Nigeria?
They are amazingly resilient. I mean, we've met people from Maiduguri up in the north and Sokoto, places where it is really difficult to be Christians and you can't move around freely. And yet when you meet them and they talk about their faith, they're vibrant, they're happy, they're joyful, and they're steadfast in their belief that they will overcome. And that's where, you know, they really have a drive that really is keeping them going. And that's a good thing for both the church and them.
Yeah, and this unfortunately is not, you know, the first type of incident against Christians in Nigeria. I'm wondering, though, what concerns you the most about this, Ed, and what we can do to help, if at all.
I think one of the things, I mean, we as the two bodies, we as the Catholic faithful can pray and offer support, because there's going to be a lot of people in need, families for trauma, et cetera. And I think also we should ask our leaders to change our strategy towards Nigeria. In 2021, at the beginning of 2021, Nigeria was removed from a country of particular concern. And for the church, Nigeria is a country of great concern. As you mentioned, this has come all too often, that about 3,500 Nigerian Christians are killed every year for the past 15 years. It's not new. And the only thing that's new is the places where it happened. So I think what we need to do is we need to be very prayerfully aware of what's going on, to be a little bit outspoken, and to ask for our government, other governments, to make changes, to put pressure on the Buhari administration, because they don't seem either willing or capable of doing it. They've let this go on for years now, and it just gets worse. It's not getting any better.
Well, Ed, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us about this. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and thank you. God bless.
Coming up, what a cultural commentator discovers when he asks a simple question about gender. Plus, the head of an archdiocese in Oklahoma weighs in on the state's use of capital punishment. The state of Louisiana is banning biological males from competing in female sports from kindergarten through 12th grade, as well as at the collegiate level. SB 44 passed into law yesterday without Governor John Bel Edwards' signature. The governor expressed his disagreement with the legislation, but commented that the bill's passage into law was inevitable based on the support in the State House. And joining us now is Matt Walsh, host of The Matt Walsh Show on the Daily Wire and host and producer of the new film, What is a Woman? Matt, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. I want to get to your film, but first I want to get your thoughts on Louisiana's new law and what you think it signals.
Well, it's another one of these laws that, look, we shouldn't need laws like this, because this is basic common sense that biological males shouldn't compete against females. But in fact, we do need these laws, and we need them all across the country. And also, by the way, this is something I've been shouting from the rooftops to anyone who will listen, is that this is a winning issue for Republicans, for conservatives. And look, if you want to put Democrats in the position of having to defend the idea that biological males should compete against females, then let them defend it, because there is no defending it whatsoever. This is a common sense position, and one that if you talk to almost any normal person and they feel like they can speak freely about it without being, you know, canceled or punished for giving their opinion, almost any normal person will agree that obviously there are differences between men and women, and you have to have those segregated for the purposes of sports.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, in your film, you talked to some female athletes and got their perspective about, you know, competing against transgender athletes. What did they have to say?
I thought, well, we heard from a teammate of Leah Thomas, who's the UPenn swimmer, male competing against females, and that I thought the conversation with the teammate was revealing. It was also kind of disturbing to hear from her, because, you know, we talk about like this idea of gaslighting, which we hear from the left all the time. They accuse people of gaslighting. Well, what happened to the women on that team was actual gaslighting, where they were told that, listen, you're going to have this man's going to be competing against you, and it's going to be in the locker room with you. And if you don't like it, then you can go to counseling and get therapy for it, because the problem is for you. You're the one with the problem if you simply are not comfortable having, you know, a male body in the locker room with you. And the fact that women are being treated this way is just obviously horrendous.
Yeah, it's really kind of unbelievable. I know you spoke to a wide spectrum of people. You spoke to doctors who perform sex reassignment surgeries, to gender study professors, psychiatrists, and even just random people on the street. What did you learn from those conversations? What were some of the big takeaways?
I think the number one takeaway from the film in general, and certainly from my experiences filming it, is that this gender ideology is completely pervasive. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's taken over society. But also, it's just totally empty. I mean, it's vacuous. It's empty at its core. It's completely hollow. There's no defending it. And I gave its proponents plenty of opportunities to defend it, and they weren't able to. I mean, they literally no defense could they offer for this position. So instead, all they have is sort of evasion, and at certain points, even just getting up and walking out of the room because they realize that there's nothing that they can say in defense of it.
Yeah, and your film is, I watched it, it's entertaining, quite comical at times, but it really does deal with a really serious subject, in particular, the transgender movement and its impact on our children. You had a really powerful discussion with Scott Nugent, a biological woman who then transitioned to a male who now advocates against gender-affirming care for children. Tell us a little bit more about that conversation.
Yeah, that was, I think, the most powerful conversation, at least for me, in the film. And I think Scott Nugent is one of the heroes of the film. And it was refreshing in a way to talk to her, even though the story that she told was disturbing and horrifying and very quite sad. Refreshing just in the sense that, well, here was someone who was actually willing to talk and was open and honest, willing to have the conversation. Whereas every person I talked to up to that point, all the so-called experts who are pushing this stuff, even though they push it, and this is their whole life, they didn't want to talk about it. All they did was evade. She was very honest about it, and she made clear that what we're doing, especially to kids, there's no real defense of it. This is sort of experimental. We're treating kids like lab rats, and we hear all these breezy reassurances about so-called puberty blockers or so-called gender reassignment surgery. All these assurances that, it's totally safe, there are no long-term consequences, and that is all, as Scott Nugent explained, is just a total lie.
Yeah, we were running out of time, but I want to get to this because another thing that really stuck out to me was your conversation with the dad in Canada who wasn't on board with his daughter's decision to transition. Tell us what happened to him and about the laws in Canada that really do seem to be taking away parents' rights.
Yeah, the laws in Canada basically say that if your daughter says that she's a boy, that you are legally required to affirm that. And if you don't, then you're going to go to jail. And that's exactly what happened to this father. And these laws, and this is one thing you wanted to make clear to me in our conversation, is that, if we're living in the United States, don't get a false sense of security that, well, that's just the crazy people up in Canada that are doing that. These kind of laws are currently right now making their way into the United States. And it's only getting worse from there, which is another reason why we have to be aware of that and pushing back.
Yeah, and it took you a while. I don't want to give it away to anybody, but it took a while for you to get that answer, what is a woman? Did you think that going around the country and around the world that it would take you so long to get an answer to such a basic question?
I didn't really. I thought especially, talking to just random average people on the street, I honestly thought that we would get a straight answer from many more people than we did. I mean, I found that even just average people on the street, like 95% at least appeared to be or were presenting themselves as confused about this. And so it was, the reason we made the film in the first place is because I knew that this was a pervasive problem. But in filming it, I learned that it's even more so than I thought originally.
Yeah, and one thing really quickly I want to ask you, Matt, I know people were asking you this in the movie. Why do you care? Why do you care so much? So why do you care so much about this?
Well, the number one reason that I care, and I think we need to make this very clear, the number one reason that I care is that it's the truth, and I care about the truth. There is an inherent value to the truth itself, and that should actually be enough, right? I mean, that's all that should need to be said. But growing from that kind of foundation, there are other really important concerns, like the fact that women are having opportunities taken from them, they're having their privacy taken away from them, they're having their identities basically appropriated, and also children are being victimized by that. So those things are obviously extremely important, but it starts with, I think, the intrinsic inherent value of the truth.
Well, we're going to leave it right there. Matt, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And What is the Woman is now available to watch. The film contains content and language that may be sensitive to some viewers and may not be appropriate for children. Up next, learn more about a recent conference in Rome examining how the church can better serve people with special needs. A federal court affirms the death penalty is constitutional in Oklahoma. Archbishop Paul Coakley from the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City called for an end to the death penalty, saying it contributes to the spiral of violence in society today. And finally tonight, an event in Rome recently examined ways the church can better serve people with disabilities. The conference was called Us, Not Them. The Bishops' Conference of Italy organized the two-day event. Several hundred people took part. Topics included "To be human is to belong" and the role of disabled people in the church. Joining us now from Rome is Cristina Gangemi, Director of the Kairos Forum and Disability Advisor to the Bishops of England and Wales. Director Gangemi, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. If you don't mind, can you tell us more about this event and also how it went?
Oh, the event was absolutely wonderful. Just before the pandemic hit, Pope Francis had, in the Bishops' Conference of Italy, an office that looked after catechesis and disability, headed up by Sister Veronica Donatello. But he asked Sister Veronica if she would move out beyond just catechesis and look at the project of life for people with disabilities, so that they could live their full lives within the church and in society, and really look at the whole project of life. What did it mean to live in the world as a Christian with a disability? And the national, I have to get this right, the National Pastoral Office for Disability was born. And this was the first conference of the office in its new guise, if you like, in its new being. We're very excited because it takes disability out of just being a specialised area in the church, and as Pope Francis said to us, disability must be put centre of everything that we do, because people with disabilities, I call them creative learners, creative communicators, are just people living in the world, the breath of God, and so therefore we wanted to bring that breath out into the church and all that she does.
Yeah, and I'm curious, what are the church's ideas and proposals for reaching out to those that have special needs?
Well, the church's ideas and proposals for reaching out to people with special needs is no different to that of reaching out to anybody in the church. I think that for a long time, those of us that worked in this field have been really pushing to have the lives of people with disabilities seen as ordinary. Ordinary people living ordinary lives in what can sometimes be an extraordinary, difficult society and church that seems to sort of leave them out or forget them. And the reason is usually because we don't know what to do. If somebody has a thinking pattern or has a way of moving that's different to the typical person in the church, we don't know what to do. So much of our work, and indeed this conference, was very much about exploring together what we should do and what we can do.
Before I let you go, what comes next in this initiative?
Well, what comes next is now, at the end of the conference, we were very blessed to have disability theologians from the Protestant tradition listening to what we were saying and responding. And what comes next, as Sister Veronica says, is that each person in their own church setting and diocese has to look out to see who's missing. And then we have to begin to start doing things differently, creatively, symbolically, so that everybody can express their faith and live their call to discipleship. That's what's next. Pope Francis has said, or everybody or nobody, and we must move from being a church that excludes to recognising a place of belonging and moving forward together. That's what's next. We're very lucky because we have some new guidelines in the General Directive Catechesis that help us to do that.
Well, Director Gangemi, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us about this really important issue. We're grateful. God bless you. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.